Cool. So let's get started. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming and joining us today. I wanted to introduce you to Jeff. He's our CTO. He is going to be talking about Hub v2 and also the stability as of late. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yours.
So let's get started. As April said, there are really two topics that I wanted to spend a little time on this week, one of which was our general efforts around platform reliability and availability and stability and where we are with those things. So just a general kind of report in on those efforts and where we stand, and then to talk a bit about Hub v2 and the progress that we're making there, and to kind of set everybody's expectations about what's coming with Hub v2 over the next few months. So first, the platform reliability, availability, general stability. Of course, as all of you are probably painfully aware, we've had plenty of issues over the past, let's call it 6 months, but it's really been longer than that. With regard to platform reliability and stability. And we've had a number of initiatives underway to improve that. We're not done with that by any stretch of the imagination, but I think everybody's probably experienced some improvements over the last week or two. And really those are flowing out of those initiatives that we've had to generally improve overall reliability and availability. So I want to break that down a bit and talk about each of those in turn. And this is the kind of detail that I would never, put in a blog post for the general SmartThings customer community. But I think, for the developer community, you guys deserve a little bit more detail and understanding about what we're doing and where the issues have been and what we're doing to correct it. The first has been a lot of, probably most of the stability issues that we've experienced over the past 6 to 9 months have been related to problems in what we call our DevCon layer of our architecture. And that is the layer that allows us to hold open a connection to every single SmartThings hub that we have in operation. So the way DevCon works is that the SmartThings hub connects out from your home to our DevCon environment, and DevCon holds open a socket, a TCP socket, to your hub, and we use that to pass two-way messages between DevCon, between our platform and the hub. It is kind of logically the same as what folks like Apple do to support push notifications, right? Your phone, unbeknownst to most people, but your phone holds open a similar socket to Apple's environment, and that's what's used to send push notifications to every Apple phone. That's a non-trivial kind of engineering challenge, because what it means is that a particular server is holding open your connection to your hub, and when we go to send a command down to that hub, we need to know which server to get it to. The inbound side is relatively easy, right? Because all the hubs flow messages and events up to our platform, and on the inbound side, they can all concentrate into the platform through our queuing system, which I can talk about in a minute. But on the outbound side, in order to send a command to your hub, we've got to get it to the right server so that server can then put it on the right socket to get it to your hub. And that's where we've had some reliability challenges, where we use a technology called Vertex, and Vertex supports a clustering of servers so that we can hand a message off to the Vertex cluster and have Vertex determine which server to get that message to. And that's literally the part that's been giving us some fits in recent months, where one of the servers in that farm would literally become kind of logically disconnected from the cluster and wouldn't be able to send messages in and wouldn't be able to receive messages back out. So it was just kind of stranded or orphaned from the cluster. And so what we've done literally in the past week is that we've now moved from using vertex clustering to eliminating that technology from our platform. We're no longer using that clustering technology, and we've replaced it with something that is kind of more of a homegrown solution. But we've already seen a lot of improvement there. That said, we had an incident yesterday that was unrelated to that vertex clustering, obviously, because we're not using it anymore. But probably still looked very similar. For about an hour yesterday, we had an issue where some hubs were not able to communicate, but it was at a different point in the architecture. And I think that's a great segue for me into the kind of the broader discussion of every time we knock things down in one area, it opens up the opportunity to see issues sometimes in another area. So the issue yesterday was actually a queuing issue, and there are three big architectural areas that we've been working on replacing. One was vertex clustering and changing how we do that DevCon layer. That's done. The second is our queuing system, and we're in the process of really completely replacing how we do queuing internally to our platform, because we know that what we're doing today won't scale long term. So that'll be one of the next areas that you see it that we will replace. Although in all cases, when we do these things and do them successfully, they should be transparent to you guys and transparent to our broader customer community, other than seeing an improvement, right? But you shouldn't see any other changes. So Vertex or DevCon improvements, those are done. Queuing improvements in progress, those are not done yet. And then the last one is scheduler improvements. The other big area where I think we've seen a ton of customer impact is with scheduled smart apps. And the area where this has perhaps the biggest impact is around sunrise and sunset events, because it's the area where we generate a whole bunch of load onto our platform all at once, right? For everybody in the same time zone, roughly, right? That has a similar sunrise sunset time. That also has been replaced with a new scheduler system, but we haven't yet moved all customers onto it. So unlike the DevCon re-architecting that we've done, where it was kind of a big bang thing, we switched everybody to it all at once. The scheduler improvements are one where we actually don't have to switch everybody to it all at once. And so we've rolled that into production. We're testing it internally with employees right now. And probably as soon as tomorrow, we're going to be starting to switch customers over to that new scheduler. So tomorrow we'll actually be starting to put real, external customers onto the new scheduler, and our expectation is that that is going to dramatically improve the reliability of the smart app scheduling, whether it's sunrise, sunset, or whether it's scheduling for a specific time. I've got lights in my house that automatically turn off at 9:30, and another set at 11 p.m. and another set at midnight. So whatever it is, this new scheduling architecture should dramatically improve both the reliability, but also the accuracy of that scheduling. I'm sure all of you have seen cases where smart apps were supposed to fire at a certain time and they were late, right? Or didn't happen at all. And that's what this is really designed to solve for. So 3 big areas: DevCon improvements, queuing done, scheduling improvements done and in production, but will be gradually rolled out to consumers over the coming week, and then finally the queuing improvements, which are still in progress and really will be probably months in the making before we get all of the queuing improvements actually rolled out. So let me pause there and let you guys give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions, because certainly while that's 3 big areas of improvement, it doesn't cover the universe. And so I want to make sure I give you guys an opportunity to ask questions and for me to address anything that's specific that you have on your mind with regard to reliability and stability. And then after we do that, then I'll go on to talk about Hub v2. So let me open up the floor for any questions.
Hey, Jeff. So the first question that they had was, what are some planned release cycles? I assume there's no more platform releases on a Friday?
Generally we don't like platform releases on a Friday, right? Because it creates an opportunity to interfere with people's personal plans. We like to try to do platform releases at times when we know we're going to have the whole team around to address any issues if they do come up. So yes. That said, what you're going to see from us, generally speaking, and this is not just specific to the platform, but also inclusive of mobile app releases, we're going to be starting to do a lot more sticking with weekly releases on the platform side, probably sticking with monthly releases on the mobile app side, although potentially going more frequently, but across the board doing a lot more dark moding of features where we expose those to a limited audience for beta testing. And of course, as we start to get serious about that, we'll give you guys the opportunity to sign up and become part of that beta program. But really trying to get much more in line with industry best practice with regard to how we roll out new features and doing more dark moding of those features. And so from that perspective, when we do a release, a lot of times, there's not going to be any visible changes because it's only going to affect people who are actually participating in the dark moding of a particular feature. Sometimes that's going to be opt-in. Sometimes it may actually be something where we're A/B testing a feature. We're trying to get user experience feedback and we're A/B testing something. So we're going to be trying to really actually increase the frequency of releases, but decrease the impactfulness of those or the potential impact of those releases as we go forward, as we try to do smaller changes, but doing them more frequently.
Cool, thank you. And then what is the goal for uptime, reliability for SmartThings, and how is it currently measured?
Yeah, so we actually measure availability across different components. And it's very much aligned with what you see on the status page. That we internally we track availability across all of those different components that you see on the status page, meaning things like hang on, I'm actually trying to bring it up where I can look at it. Where the heck is it? Hub connectivity, mobile app connectivity, scheduled smart apps, smart app execution. All of those things are things that we track availability for. We track it on a weekly basis. We track it on a monthly basis. We don't publish those numbers, but I can tell you that the goal is, and generally, we're when we are not having the kinds of issues that we've seen, we're hitting 4 nines of availability. When we have the kind of issues that we've experienced with DevCon, it's easy for us to get knocked down into the 2 nines of availability, and it's a great way to understand the true impact of availability on consumers, right? That what will go largely unnoticed when you have problems is 4 nines, right? 4 nines is where you actually need to be in order to have small, little tiny availability issues, but to have those largely go unnoticed by your customers. When you drop down into the 3 nines or even the 2 nines, right? 99% sounds like great availability, to the uninitiated, right? To people who don't know any better. 99 sounds like great availability, but of course everybody can appreciate or understand it when you put it in terms like, if your car only ran 99% of the time, right, you'd be at the mechanic screaming about what's going on. And we've dipped down into those numbers. So our general goal for availability is 4 nines in the short term, and then long term getting to 5 nines. But getting to 5 nines requires geo redundancy of our platform, right? But there's also a dimension to this which is related to Hub v2. So I'm going to pause there, let April ask some more questions, and remember to come back to that discussion with Hub v2.
Are there any best practices that developers should follow when coding smart apps and device types in order to improve the general stability, responsiveness, and robustness of the SD platform?
That's an awesome question. Yes, absolutely. The challenge is that we probably don't know what they all are yet, right? And there's certainly best practices. We are in the process of ramping up more and more people on the developer community team in order to help document these things and really make them more and more understood. But I can also, I'll share some anecdotes with you. We've had platform issues that were actually the direct result of a developer smart app causing a problem, right? Doing something like, and we're learning as we go where there are cases where apps can actually cause platform issues because we haven't either because we haven't published a best practice, or B, because our sandboxing of smart apps didn't detect a problem and shut it down soon enough. So it's a learning process, right? When you're building up, basically an operating system for the home and letting developers write these applications, we're not able to foresee every possible thing that a developer could do that could cause a problem. And so, we have to iterate on this as quickly as we can and develop those best practices. I think the next big touch point that we're really shooting for internally to do much better on both documentation and training and probably publication of those developer best practices is going to be at the next Samsung Developers Conference, the SDC. And I think that'll be the place where you see us, hopefully come out with something more formal around best practices. But certainly, yes, there are, and without going into a list of them, just know that we're working on kind of formalizing what those best practices are so that we can share them.
Thank you. And what are the KPIs used in making the SLA numbers?
That's why we break it down into all those different areas, right? Because when we talk about the things that show up on our status page as different components of the platform, meaning hub connectivity, mobile app connectivity, push messages, smart apps, device control, scheduled smart apps, et cetera, those are the things that we're monitoring. And so, let me talk about maybe KPIs is not quite the right term that we use internally, but we have monitors that clue us into problems in any of those different components or areas. And those monitors are measuring both availability, meaning is it working, but also they're looking at transactional kind of performance. So one thing that we don't publish numbers on, but you guys should appreciate or know that we're doing, is that we actually have synthetic transactions and we have rough and tough about 1,000 simulated hubs that are sending messages into the platform, knowing that there's a smart app that's going to trigger a response to that message. So we have literally simulated hubs that send in like a motion event with a smart app that is set to recognize subscribe to the motion event and then turn on a switch. And that simulated hub sends in the motion event and then expects to see the switch command come back out to turn on the light, right? And then every single one of those simulated hubs is then reporting the timing, right? How long did that take to happen, right? From the time I sent the simulated motion event in till the time I got the on command back out, how long did that take? And what we measure on things like that is, what percentile of all of those synthetic transactions, and we run roughly 1,000 of them a minute, right? And then we measure what percentage of those happened within an acceptable period of time, right? And acceptable to us is under a second. What percentage of those happened in a period of time that was kind of considered unacceptable, from our perspective, but a warning, kind of a yellow. So green, think of it as a stoplight chart, green, yellow, red. So under a second is green, under 2 seconds is yellow, over 2 seconds is red, right? And we generally see those kind of synthetic transactions or those simulated hubs, right? 99% of them happened in less than a second. And in fact, 99% of them happen in less than 500 milliseconds, right? So those are the kind of things and that's just one example. We have tons and tons of different of these types of monitors that are looking both at the outside, how long does it take from the perspective of the hub, but also looking at measurements, deep into the platform, right? So that I can tell you, as an example, I could tell you how long the average cache fetch time is in order to fetch a smart app, a compiled smart app from the cache, right? We measure lots and lots and lots of very deep internal measurements within the platform as well, and we trend those over time. And so we've gotten really, really quite mature at how we instrument the platform and understand what's happening at any moment in time. And one logical response to that is, well, gee, Jeff, if you're so mature at instrumenting the platform, why does it, why are we still having some of these stability issues, right? And the answer to that is knowing where the problem is, right, and knowing what the root cause of the problem is, and then coming up with a fix for that root cause, and then scale testing that fix to make sure that it makes the problem better, not worse, right? Those are all different steps in the process, right? And so our instrumentation tells us where, generally if there is a problem, then we have to understand exactly, where it is in the platform. Then we have to understand root cause. Then we have to come up with a fix, and sometimes that fix involves replacing an entire subsystem that simply isn't going to scale with us long term, right? And then even after we've come up with a fix, then we have to scale test it, right? Or replace the subsystem. Then we have to scale test it and make sure that it's not only going to satisfy our current requirements, but it's going to scale long term, right? And knock all the bugs out of it, right? And that's exactly where we've been with things like the DevCon re-architecting, like the scheduler replacement. We've been scale testing the scheduler replacement literally for a couple of months now, and debugging it, just getting all the defects out of it before we were ready to roll it into production, right? And so we've gotten really good at instrumentation and monitoring, but some of these problems are non-trivial, scale problems when you're processing, rough and tough, 1 billion transactions every 4 days now, right? And that's going to soon be 1 billion transactions every 3 days, and then 1 billion transactions every 2 days. You got to be really careful not to make things worse, in your attempt to make things better. So long answer to a short question, but.
Is there any way that ST can be more transparent about platform changes? For example, there is a few issues that might have fixed in the platform, which there was no documents for fixes.
Happy to be more transparent. The other in most cases, I think the other thing that we're still I'll be transparent about an organizational issue with you, which is that we're hiring like crazy, and part of transparency has to do with having enough resources to be transparent, right? We're hiring about 20 people a month right now and onboarding them to the team, which is a lot, right? It's a big challenge. And so, yes, I think you're going to see us get progressively more and more transparent. There are areas where we're not going to be transparent, right? We're not going to be transparent about, certain things from a security perspective, right? We're not going to be transparent about, if there's a case where a developer discovered something that they could do in a smart app that had a negative impact on the platform, right? So there are certain things that it's good to be transparent about. There's other things that it's not good to be transparent about. But I think in general, my goal is to increase that level of transparency wherever we can.
He says, I'm mostly concerned in regards to breaking or fixing changes that impact smart apps device types.
Yeah, and that's an area where our goal is actually to if you guys are familiar with how Salesforce.com does this, our goal is actually to introduce probably over the next 6 months, a unit testing framework for smart apps that allow us to unit test smart apps before we roll out a platform release, so that if we know that we're introducing a change that could be a breaking change for smart apps, that we're able to run your unit tests on a smart app, and if that causes a break, then we have an opportunity to evaluate what we did and see if we did something wrong, or B, if it's a breaking change that simply is unavoidable, then at least we have an opportunity to communicate with the developer before we publish the release, instead of just publishing it and letting that change break a smart app. So we're trying to take a page from Salesforce.com there, where that's exactly what they do. They force developers to write unit tests for all of their Apex apps on the Salesforce.com platform, and then they run all those unit tests as part of every single platform release. The last time I talked to some of my friends at Salesforce, they were running something on the order of 50 million unit tests every time they did a platform release, to try to make sure that they weren't having breaking changes to the platform. So that's the direction that we're headed. When we go that direction, it's going to look like optional unit tests first, right? Give you an opportunity to write those unit tests, and if you have them, we'll run them. And then at some point down the road, required unit tests where we're not gonna publish smart apps unless they have unit tests that go with them. That said, for most of you guys, a lot of your smart apps are in your own personal account, and they're not published, right? They're published in your personal sandbox, right? They're not published in our catalog, and we're never going to require, I don't think, unit tests for your own personal sandbox. So there is going to be, I think there are always going to be cases where, we should try to be more transparent about things that might break your apps. But the only way you're going to be insulated against breaking changes, in your own personal sandbox, is if you write unit tests for your own personal apps, right? That's there will be a balance, right? There's going to be that kind yes, we're going to try to be more transparent, but and you guys are going to write unit tests, and the combination of those two things is what's going to get us where we need to go.
I think in terms of submitted questions for stability, that was that.
Okay, great. Let's move on then and talk a bit about Hub v2. So, we've been talking publicly about Hub v2 since CES in January. Hub v2 is a very different animal than Hub v1. As you guys are all aware, Hub v1 was really nothing more than a proxy that let us get to the radios in your home from the cloud, right? I mean, that's all it did was manage the radios and shuffle things back and forth between your house and our cloud. Hub v2, and by the way, Hub v1 really actually didn't even run a real operating system, right? Hub v1 had a very lightweight kernel on it, didn't really have a real operating system, had a really tiny little PIC32 microprocessor. Hub v2 is a very different animal. Hub v2 is a Linux-based machine. It's got 512 mega memory. It's got a single core 1 gigahertz processor. It's a fairly capable computing environment. Hub v2 for the first time gives us the opportunity to basically take a good chunk of our cloud software stack and squish it down and run it in that hub. And really, there are the following components that are going to be running on Hub v2. Number one is what we call Hub Core, and Hub Core is the equivalent of the Hub v1 software environment, right? So Hub Core is basically the manager of the radios. Number two, it's what we call the App Engine. An App Engine is basically that cloud software stack squished down to run locally on the hub. And the way App Engine works is that it communicates with Hub Core so that basically Hub Core can kind of continue to be as dumb as it's always been, right? It receives messages from devices. It sends those messages somewhere, right? Today it's to the cloud, but in the future it's to the App Engine, right? So the Hub Core can hand messages off to the App Engine. Then the processing within the App Engine looks something like this. The App Engine has a layer that looks just like our cloud. It's kind of like the DevCon layer, and so messages go through that layer and get queued up. There's an internal queuing system within the App Engine. Then the first thing after the queuing is the device type handler. So we're running device type handlers locally in the App Engine. If a device and devices can have device types that run locally, but devices can have device types that only run in the cloud. So generally speaking, though, if your device is local to your hub, we want that device type handler to run locally, right? But it's the same device type handler that runs in the cloud today, just made to execute locally, so that literally the exact same code works locally or in the cloud. The device type handler does the same thing as it does today. It turns protocol-specific messages into events. The events then go through a subscription processing layer to see, are there any smart apps running locally that are subscribed to this event? At the same time that events are going for local subscription processing, they're also going to the cloud for subscription processing, because in the Hub v2 context, an event can be handled by a local smart app, but it might also have a cloud-based smart app that is subscribed to that same event. And so events really have to go both places and be processed for subscriptions. If there are any local smart apps subscribed to that event, then they're executed as well. And the local processing environment for smart apps allows those smart apps to do all of the same things that a smart app in the cloud can do. It can generate notifications, right? It could send an SMS message. It can generate push notifications. It can do anything that a smart app in the cloud can do, with one notable exception. It can't make web service calls like a cloud smart app can do, right? So if you want to write smart apps that are going to make external web service calls, like to other internet services, that smart app is going to run in the cloud, right? On the other hand, it could make web service calls on your local network, right? So that's something that we're working on finishing up right now, where device types and smart apps on your local network can talk to other devices on your local network in a much more robust way than we support today. So Hub Core, App Engine, all running on Hub v2, and with the cloud really being the manager of all this, the cloud deciding, gee, can that app run on the hub? Yes, it can. So I'm going to push it down there, right? I'm going to get that app running locally. Can that device type run locally on the hub? Oh, yes, it can. So I'm going to push it down and have it run locally on the hub. So the cloud becomes the kind of the administrator of all this, making the decisions about whether device types and smart apps can run locally, and then moving them or pushing them down to the hub when that's possible, and then continuing to handle all the communication from the hub, so that events flow up from the hub and still get archived in the cloud, so that even though apps may run locally, we still maintain the log of everything that's happened in the cloud, so that you can go and see that stuff and understand what's happened in terms of events and smart app executions in your home. The Hub v2 has built-in battery backup, so that if you lose power, it will continue to run, and any local automations or smart apps will continue to run, but recognize that that's limited in what it can do, right? Obviously, a battery-powered hub, if you lose power, is only going to be able to talk to battery-powered devices, right? And that'll be fine for a lot of battery-powered sensors, but there aren't a lot of battery-powered actuators. One of those, however, that is important is something like a Z-Wave or Zigbee door lock that is battery-powered, right? And that's one of the main kind of use cases here, is that even in the event of a power outage, you'd still be able to unlock your front door, right? Because or your hub would automatically be able to unlock your front door. Which brings me to the next point, which is about visibility and control. When we first release Hub v2, if your internet connection goes down, you're not going to be able to control it from here, from the mobile app on day one. Let's say it that way, on day one. That our method for controlling the hub remotely from our mobile app still depends on the cloud to be the proxy for getting commands down to your hub. Over time, however, we are going to expose kind of a, I don't know, call it a, I don't know, for those of you who are in the military, call it a battle short. We're going to expose the ability for the phone to directly control the hub, phone to hub, right, in the event of an internet outage. Probably not in the event of a power outage, though, because you've probably lost your Wi-Fi network in the home in the event of a power outage, right, unless you've got UPS supporting that. But we are going to ultimately support the ability to do limited visibility and control directly from the phone to the hub in the event of an internet outage. So, and think of it that way, that the Hub v2 is designed to kind of provide some resiliency in the case of both internet outages and power outages, right? Of course, if you're having a power outage, you're probably having an internet outage, but the reverse is not necessarily true. You can have an internet outage without having a power outage, and that's really the case that I'm talking about here, where ultimately, and we're probably talking about the end of the year, ultimately the phone will be able to talk directly to the hub for limited control of devices. You're never going to be able to set up new devices without the cloud. You're never going to be able to install smart apps without the cloud. But if your internet connection goes down, we do want you to be able to at least see the devices and control the devices from here, yeah, even if the internet connection is down. So where are we in the general life cycle for Hub v2? Let me talk about that for a minute. Hub v2 is in the hands of our employees for an employee beta test right now. And we're working through, issues as employees find those issues. We're solving them. We're doing about a firmware release every week for Hub v2 right now with our employees. And as soon as we get Hub v2 to a point where we feel good about its stability, then we're going to do a closed beta. Right, we're going to do a beta with a select set of customers, and I believe April probably knows better than I do, but I believe we actually already have a list of people who've signed up for that beta. But we'll do a closed beta with customers, and it's guys like you that we want to do that closed beta with, right? People who are much more knowledgeable about how SmartThings works, that when there are problems that can help us diagnose them and are willing to help diagnose problems. And so that'll be the next step. Will be that closed beta of Hub v2, and then we're on a path which I feel pretty good about to then launch Hub v2 on July 1st. That's roughly the timeline when we'll start selling Hub v2 and in our store, on the Amazon store, and other places. So let me stop there then and give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions about Hub v2.
Hub v1 roll past Hub v2 rollout. Will there be allowed to be a repeater?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, if I already have Hub v1 and I get Hub v2, can I continue to use Hub v1 as a repeater on my network? We're looking at that. There are actually two options there that we're exploring. One option is not Hub v1 technically as a repeater, but just Hub v1 continuing to own its own Zigbee network and the devices that are on that network, right? Whereas Hub v2 would come into your home, form its own Zigbee network, and have devices on its network, right? So you could actually have two Zigbee networks within the home. One of the things that, and this is true whether you have a v1 hub and a v2 hub, or maybe you have two v2 hubs for some reason, right? One of the scenarios that we've always said we will support and do support today is a multi-hub scenario. You can have more than one hub. It works today, in fact. But in a Hub v2 world, think about what that means. If I have two Hub v2s, right, are they both running device types and smart apps? And our answer to that in the very near term is no. That if you have two v2 hubs, only one of them is going to run what I refer to as the app engine, and the other one is basically going to act like a v1 hub, right? And so it actually would be the same if you had a v1 hub and a v2 hub, right? That the v1 hub needs to be smart enough to talk to the app engine running on the v2 hub to keep those device types and smart apps running locally, even if the devices are connected over here on a v1 hub. So we're looking at that scenario first because, frankly, it's the easiest, right? We don't actually have to do much in order to support that scenario where each hub has its own Zigbee network, but they know how to talk to each other on the local network. Then the second scenario is the one that was asked about. Can we actually have the v1 hub just act as a repeater? But that requires that it join the v2, that basically there's only one Zigbee or Z-Wave network, and they're just participating in that network. So we're looking at both of those. The one that's the easiest to support is the one that's going to happen first, and the one that's the hardest to support, is the one that'll come along later. But yes, we're looking at both of those options.
Local storage options, caching files, etc. on Hub v2. External storage as an option.
Yeah, there is local storage, meaning flash. Hub v2 has about four gig of flash memory, so it's got a lot of flash memory, and we use that internally for the local storage in order to store smart apps, device types, smart app state, device type state, uh, basically the little database of what devices you have connected to the hub. All of that is stored in that flash memory. And so your opportunity to access it as a developer, though, is really no different than what we expose in the cloud, right? You have app state that you can persist things into as a developer, and that app state in the cloud is stored in a database, a NoSQL database. On the hub, that app state is persisted into flash memory, and then we retrieve it anytime your application needs to run. Um, uh, there are cases that we're looking at for other kind of local storage, but not day one. You know, there are other cases where we would, expose local storage for other uses, and we'll expose those, gradually over time. In terms of external storage, that doesn't get particularly interesting or important uh, until we have our hub doing some things that it doesn't do today at all, like processing audio and video. And when we get to that point, external storage is absolutely something that we're considering and looking at, but obviously we're not to that point yet. So stay tuned on that front, because those are both things that we're working on as well.
It was said that all devices except for those cloud-to-cloud integrations will run locally in Hub v2. But what about the Nest or Ecobee thermostats or any other Wi-Fi thermostats that require local processing?
Yeah, so those two examples are actually cloud to cloud, right? So from a SmartThings perspective, it isn't relevant that the Nest is on your local network, because we can't talk to it on the local network. Nest prohibits us from talking to it on the local network, right? Same thing with Ecobee. Same thing with, well, not the same thing. Belkin Wemo is a little different because we can talk to it on the local network, but they also have cloud to cloud APIs. But for things like Nest and Ecobee, those are cloud to cloud devices. As far as we're concerned, they might as well be on the cell network, because we can't talk to them on the Wi-Fi network. So the general rule of thumb is, if it's a cloud connected device, that device type handler stays in the cloud. If it's a locally connected device, that device type handler will run locally. um, and there's an exception to that, not an exception, but there's a nuance to that I'll talk about. And then applications, smart apps, are going to follow the devices that they use. So if I write a smart app that interfaces with your thermostat, and the user configures that smart app to use a Z-Wave thermostat, then that smart app is going to be run locally because it's using a local device. If, however, that same smart app is configured to use a Nest, and Greg, whoever you are, I'm getting a lot of noise off your microphone. If you could mute, that would be awesome. Or April, if you can mute it. So if I have the exact same smart app that ran locally using a Z-Wave thermostat, but now the user configures it to use an Ecobee thermostat, that smart app is going to run in the cloud. So you as a developer won't necessarily know where your smart apps are going to run, right? You're going to write a smart app that uses our capability abstraction, our layer, to access devices, and you're not going to know if it's capability.thermostat, you don't know if that's a local thermostat or a cloud thermostat. That's why the platform is going to make those determinations at install time. When the user goes to install that app, that's when we say, oh, all of the devices that are used by this app are local. So, and all the device types are running locally. So let's push the smart app to run locally. But if even one of the devices used by a smart app is cloud connected, the whole smart app is going to run in the cloud. And that's a simple approach from our perspective at the moment, and maybe we'll get more sophisticated with it over time. But on day one, that's the way it's going to work.
Is there a plan for backup in case the hub failure, or so we can restore a previous save state?
Yeah, we're working on that. We're actually working on it in the context of first our ability to migrate customers from Hub v1 to Hub v2. That migration is not going to be available on day one, but we're hoping to have it available within 60 days of July 1st, so that we can ship somebody a Hub v2, and that you don't have to like unpair and repair all your devices. We'll just be able to restore all of the network and device information to your Hub v2 and have it just take over. And basically that same mechanism is then what allows us to back up and restore in the case of a failed hub that has a hard failure from a hardware perspective, that we will have enough information in our cloud to be able to ship you a new hub and to restore all of the device and network information to it and have you be able to just pick up where you leave off, right? So that is absolutely the goal. We're bending the state of the art a bit in some of these cases, because frankly, even things like Zigbee don't really fully accommodate that scenario in the way from a standards perspective, right? And so we're having to invent some things in order to do that kind of backup and restore. But yes, it is. We are working on it, and it is coming.
One said perhaps a metadata tag to list methods, etc., that must run locally.
Yeah, there are. It's a great question, and that was actually what I was going to come back to when I was talking about the nuance of local apps or local devices. Some things we're going to be able to just figure out. Meaning, well, let me say it a different way. Let's talk about things like Sonos. Sonos, Belkin Wemo, Philips Hue, talking through the Philips Hue concentrator. What we generally talk about internally is LAN connected devices, where the device type is actually making HTTP requests to a local device on your local network. We're working on completely reworking how those work, because today that device type runs in the cloud, and if you've looked at any of those and looked at how they work, they're making asynchronous HTTP calls down to the hub and getting the responses all the way back in the cloud asynchronously. I want to give you guys the tools that allow you to make HTTP calls to local devices just like you would make HTTP calls to cloud-based services, where they're synchronous, where you can in a smart app say, something similar to what you do today in a smart app, say HTTP GET. I want you to be able to say local HTTP GET, and we'll use that to know that that smart app has to run on the hub, right? Because if you're making local HTTP calls, there's only one place that smart app should be. Same thing with device types. If you have a device type that's making local HTTP calls, there's one and only one place that thing should run. Beyond that, no, I don't necessarily want to have metadata that allows developers to say, hey, I want this to run locally on the hub for no good reason, right? I want there to be a reason for apps to run locally on the hub, right? Or a reason for apps to run in the cloud, right? I want the platform to make the best determination about where the app should run based on all of the information that we have available, right? what kinds of devices does the app use? What kinds of internal platform services does the app or the device type make use of? Let us do the analysis of the device type or the app and figure out the best place for it to run and let us run it there. And that's really, the path that we're on. I'll give you a simple example. There is a future world in which I want to expose things like MapReduce as a utility for smart app developers, right? You should be able to write smart apps that run MapReduce jobs, right? Well, that's very likely not going to happen on the hub, right? That's a service that you as a developer could make use of to do, machine learning, right? But it's a service that will expose in the cloud, and if you use it, your apps are going to run in the cloud, right? And whereas something like scheduling, run my app in 5 minutes, right? Or schedule my app to run again at, next Tuesday at noon. That's a service that is supported in both places, right? So when I analyze an application to understand its dependencies, right? And we are doing this kind of stuff, right? We're looking at what your application is doing and what services it's dependent on. And when I do that analysis, right, then I can say, oh, well, it's using scheduling, but scheduling is available in both places. So all things being equal, there will always be a preference to run the app locally if we can, right? So apps will run locally, device types will run locally, unless something is pulling them back to the cloud because there's a service dependency that requires them be in the cloud. And that is a selfish decision on my part, right? Because I want device types and smart apps to run locally whenever they can. Why? Because it turns out the cloud's not free. Right? This stuff actually costs money, right? And running all of this stuff in the cloud, let me tell you, costs a lot of money, right? And so Hub v2, in addition to improving overall performance and reliability and availability, right? Because things are going to run locally and you're simply going to be less dependent on the cloud. So it's going to be faster, it's going to be more reliable, right? Even if we have problems in the cloud, generally with Hub v2, you're probably not going to notice them, right? Because most of your stuff's going to be running locally, but it's also going to save money, right? Because I get to offload all this processing onto a computing environment that's in your home, and I don't have to pay Amazon for it, right? So rest assured that there will always be a natural favor given to running things locally when they can.
Will the scheduler move into the V2 hub in the future? Will scheduling be handled in the V2 hub
it's
only?
It's already there. Scheduling is already in the V2 hub, right? Scheduling is in both places, right? So there are some services there that are not, like making cloud HTTP calls, but the scheduler is already in the V2 hub. It already handles sunrise, sunset. It already handles the full range of scheduling options that the cloud scheduler handles. It's already there. And I'll give you a little kind of nuance, right, about how that's going to work, right? So let's say I have a smart app that uses sunrise, sunset, right? Sunrise, sunset changes every day, right? It's not at the exact same time every day. It's constantly changing. So what we do is we have sunrise, sunset notifications that get pushed down to the hub. Or scheduling, not notifications, scheduling information that every day, when we recalculate the sunrise sunset time, we push that information down to the hub so that the hub has the new sunrise sunset information, right? If for some reason your hub is offline and doesn't get the update, then tomorrow morning at sunrise, you're going to run at the same time that it ran today, right? It's going to be off by a minute, right? Because that's about how much these things change every day, right? but then eventually, even if your internet connection comes back up, you get the update, and sunrise and sunset are now running at the right time. So all the scheduling will happen locally, and that's actually a great example of a case where that's a huge processing burden that we get to offload off of our cloud and get running locally on the hub.
Can Hub v2 be a local web server for local networks to locate hub requests for like device status?
I, probably not on. I don't know. We're working on this, right? The way it's going to work is the same way that our cloud works, right? Meaning, I can write a smart app that acts as a web service endpoint, and that even serves up HTML pages, right? And everybody's probably seen, examples of like the device control dashboard smart app that serves up a dashboard for controlling your devices in a web page. That same functionality is ultimately going to work on the local hub, right? So that if you want to have a smart app that exposes endpoints locally, yes, you'll be able to do that. What I don't know is if you're going to be able to do that on July 1st, right? So that may lag a bit. That may not be a July 1 thing, but ultimately, yeah, absolutely. Will you be able to use it as a general purpose web server for running your favorite PHP app? No, right? It's always going to be limited to smart apps and device types in terms of the execution environment.
There needs to be a service/security layer to access device in a better way than REST endpoints. I guess that's not really a question. Sorry. Wider Z-Wave/Zigbee coverage, but how do they communicate with each other? Different RF networks or one?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Say it again.
The question was, compared to Hub v1 or 2, or compared to v1 and v2, is there a wider range or Zigbee coverage? But how do they communicate with each other?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, there's not much difference in the radio environment between Hub v1 and v2. They both support Zigbee. They both support Z-Wave. Hub v2 does support Bluetooth, so that's one difference. But in all of these cases, they don't communicate with each other, right? Because that's part of the benefit of our abstractions, right? Our SmartThings device type handler and our capability taxonomy and our event model, right, is in fact designed to not require these networks to communicate directly with each other in any way. They do it through SmartThings. They do it through smart apps. They do it through events, right? So they don't communicate with each other, and they're not going to communicate with each other. What does that mean, though? That means that we don't make use in SmartThings. We don't make use of a whole lot of protocol-specific features in Zigbee and Z-Wave, right? I can program a Z-Wave switch to communicate directly with a Z-Wave, light bulb, or the switch on the wall. I can use it to control another switch, right? And that doesn't go through SmartThings, right? We actually don't use that feature. We don't use things like scenes in Z-Wave or Zigbee, right? So there's a whole bunch of features in those protocols that are designed to allow the device network to really operate without an intelligent controller, without the smart app layer. And we don't use those things because, generally speaking, we don't kind of believe in that. Why don't we believe in that? Well, because we want to keep the intelligence layer independent of the protocol, right? We want to always decouple the intelligence from the protocol itself, so that if I want to make this Z-Wave light switch turn on that Zigbee light bulb, it has nothing to do with the protocol, and it never will in a SmartThings world. There are There are new efforts, coming from a standards perspective, however, with standards like the OIC, the Open Interconnect Consortium, where they're trying to come up with a standard that would allow, an OIC device to have a plug-in to talk to Zigbee or to talk to Z-Wave or to talk to Bluetooth, right? And it'll be really interesting to see how that works, right? Because they're basically trying to flatten what we do and get and kind of create a way of having these devices communicate directly with each other independent of the intelligence layer. I'm not sure I believe that that's the right answer, right? And it's certainly not our answer.
I know we're going a little bit over time. Are you okay on time?
Yeah, I can keep going for probably another 10 minutes.
Right. We have about 5 questions. Um,
I'll try to be brief.
how how much free memory does V2 have after OS and all modules are loaded?
Rough and tough. We make use of about a third of the total RAM with our software. And basically what that leaves is, the rest of the memory is for device types and smart apps. Uh, Unlike the cloud, however, we're able to take advantage of the local compilation of the compiled classes for these device types and smart apps, so that if you have, let's say, a Zigbee motion sensor, the compiled class for that device type only exists once on our platform, and we instantiate the object multiple times using the same compiled class so that it doesn't take up uh, that same amount of memory times 10 switches or 10 motion sensors that you might have in your house. And so so what that means is that if you've got a whole bunch of the same device, that's a really efficient thing you can do in Hub V2 because it doesn't take up a bunch of memory. If you've got 100 different devices with 100 different device type handlers, then they each take up more memory. And at the end of the day, how many devices and smart apps you can support is a function of how much memory you have left. But the answer is thousands. So we're not going to have any customers that run into hard limits on available memory anytime soon with Hub V2.
Will the V2 hub have log access other than live? It's hard to debug smart apps if we aren't watching the live logs all the time.
Yeah, we are working on that. I actually don't know the answer to where the log access or the console access, what that's going to look like for Hub V2. So April, let's make sure we take an action to kind of ask that question of the team. We're working on a variety of different kind of log uh, uh, transport mechanisms so that we can get log information back to the cloud when we need it. And so, but that is, in cases where your smart app isn't dependent on something local, you're going to write it and debug it in the cloud, and then install it locally with local devices that are going to pull it locally. But let's make sure we get a good answer to that question. One trick that I've used just over time with a lot of smart apps is that I actually of course, I do have log information in the console when I write smart apps, but I also, in every smart app that I write today, there's a method that I use to produce log information, and it takes everything that's going to the console and writes it as an application-specific event, so that I can go back and pull that information out of our event logs as well. And that way I don't have to be sitting in front of the console in order to see the log. And that way, if I'm writing a smart app that runs at when I'm not sitting there, I can still capture all the debug information that I need to capture. And so it's a great trick, and that absolutely will work on Hub V2, right? Because a smart app running locally on the hub can generate its own events, and those are going to come up to the cloud and get archived in the cloud in the same way that any other event is saved. So there'll definitely be a way to do it, but we'll get you the answer about console logging.
Will it be possible to have V2 Hub schedule a Z-Wave network repair?
Wow, what an awesome idea. uh, hadn't considered that one. There's a lot of things that we're considering around device health and whether we should be more aggressively scheduling Z-Wave network repairs. I think it makes me think about all of the capabilities of a hub and all of the tools and utilities that we have running on the hub, and what things should we expose, right? What things should we expose for apps to be able to initiate? It's a great question, but no, we hadn't thought of that.
Will there be an option to turn off low RF power on initial handshake?
Send me more information. I'm not sure exactly what the scenario is there, but that sounds like something that you should, whoever asked that question should write it up in detail and send it in, and I'd love to understand the use case and what the requirement is there.
I'll follow up on that. And then last question is, if we all sign an NDA as developers, can we get a more detailed roadmap of ST in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that should require an NDA. Certainly, we have some developers. Some of you guys are under NDA already. There are some roadmap items that we should absolutely be sharing. There are others that, frankly, priorities change. But there are things that we can and probably should share. What's challenging is not sharing the roadmap. It's making commitments around time, right? Around when these things are going to happen, right? Do we want to support video cameras, and are we working on that? Absolutely. Are we going to support other languages for writing smart apps like JavaScript? Absolutely. When are those things going to happen? Not going to make promises, right? And so, so sharing a conceptual roadmap isn't hard. Sharing something that says, by Q3 we're going to have this thing done, it's actually not best practice, right? Apple doesn't do it. Apple ships stuff, generally speaking, when it's ready, and they don't make announcements until they know for damn sure that that they can meet that kind of commitment. And even then, right, in the case of something like the Apple Watch, it seems to be dragging on, right? So it's just a bad idea to make time commitments. But I think we can certainly share more insights into where our heads are at with respect to new features and the kind of things that we're thinking about and that we want to do over time. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Those were most of the questions from Hub V2 and also stability related. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for sending your questions ahead of time. They're still asking a bunch of questions. I think we could go over them, but it's up to you, Jeff, if you still want to stay.
Yeah, I think I've actually got the kids sitting around the dinner table waiting for me, so I'm gonna beg off for now and prioritize the family. But guys, thanks for all your time, thanks for all your support, thanks for being fans, thanks for being SmartThings developers. Keep doing what you're doing, and know that it's just gonna get better and better from here on out. We're gonna be doing some super cool things. And one comment I'll make about Hub V2 is, and you're already starting to get this sense, and I can tell that from some of the questions. Once we have something as simple as a real operating system on the hub, boy, it opens up a lot of possibilities, right? And I love your imagination and thinking about what those possibilities might be. It makes things a whole lot easier. And so when you guys, when you think about things like, protocol support for future protocols like AllJoin and OIC and Thread and other things, those were hard in a Hub v1 environment where we didn't even have a stinking operating system. They get a whole lot easier, right, in a Linux-based environment where I can download a package to the hub and add new features, add new protocol support as something that is an easily downloadable firmware upgrade. And I want you guys to continue to think about, what else can we do with it once it's in the customer's home. And keep those ideas coming, because you guys are what are in many cases feeding us with ideas that we're turning into improvements to the product.
Thanks, Jeff.
So much, Jeff.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Now what do we do?
So we're a little over
time. April, did you do your laundry?
I did.
All right.
So I just want to remind you guys, so the week after this, the next developer discussion, we actually have some mobile engineers, and also the mobile team will be here. Liz Tuver, who's also our product manager, will be. She's the person who always gives you guys the mobile updates. So she'll be here. We kept a lot of your questions. We will be there to answer as much as possible. Major has a quick announcement. Major?
Can you guys hear me? 2 weeks from now, we're going to have our first UK developer call. We'll probably do it in the morning, West Coast time, probably like 10 o'clock. We're going to try to invite as many people from the UK. I'll send it to you guys too, because I'd love to have some regulars on there too. So I'll let you know about it.
And then also, I know you guys were asking about the App Store and also all those other stuff. I actually have Dora Sue planned up for May 18th. I would ask you guys to hold your questions for her then, or even prior to that. I'll try and probe some questions out or some answers out from her too. But she is going to be available, lined up for May 18th. So thank you guys so much. I hope to see you guys in the next developer discussions in 2 weeks.
Thank you, April. Bye-bye.
And hey, by the way, April, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
On what?
Nothing. Oh, look at that.
Oh, you silly girl. Congratulations.
Ben's trying to talk, but he, well, I technically was already engaged for a while, but we made their announcement on April 1st because that's going to be my name moving forward very soon when, I tie the knot. So
I'm glad you didn't hyphenate.
I really don't want to hyphenate. I think I'm going to own it.
Are you serious? His name is First?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. You know what? I can't wait to see what you guys are going to name your kids.
I will definitely make sure it's full of puns, and I'm sure the kids will hate me in the future. So
well.
I'm okay with that.